Happy to have my next guest on the Sports Card Nation guest line. He is a acclaimed, amazing artist. He can pretty much paint anything, wildlife, you name it, but more known for his work in the sports art field. And happy to have him on. I've seen his work for many moons, but finally happy to have him here on the podcast today. James Fiorentino, welcome.
Thanks for having me on. And I have to first say that may be the coolest intro I've ever seen coming
Yeah,
on
it's
someone's
all
podcast.
and then it's all downhill after that, James. So,
That's cool.
I'm, I appreciate that, and like I said, you're an acclaimed artist. Your work is speaks for itself. It's just amazing. You know, it's funny. I've said this when I've had other artists on the podcast. My dad is a great artist. He does a lot of Disney stuff. My son is incredible freehand. Like he can draw and paint the Beatles. It skipped me. I could barely draw a stick figure to save my life, even struggling like when we played Hangman as a kid. But I always have an affection for people who are talented, especially in the art field, knowing how bad I'm at it and how difficult it is to do. I know you collect cards and stuff. You grew up in New Jersey. I'll start off with this question. What came first for you, cards or painting as a young kid growing up in Jersey?
Yeah, definitely painting. I mean, that was something, I was doing at a really young age. I mean, like 3, 4, 5 years old. So I was just drawing and coloring anything I could see and get my hands on. I think my first experience probably with cards was, probably in that 8-year-old range. I think by the time 8, 9 years old, I was starting to get excited by it. I remember, which is kind of ironic, where my father had a set for me. He had bought some years before I was born. It was the 82 top set. And that had been sitting in the house, prior to me collecting, which ironically had, Ripken's rookie in it, who I would eventually paint in his 21-31 game and all that stuff. So always kind of funny how it ties into things like that. But I think by the time 85, 84, 85 started to roll around, I was starting to get into cards and the Yankees and Mattingly. My mother's cousin owned a baseball card shop in New Jersey, so there were some, family roots there with. I mean, that's like early card stuff, really. But yeah, I've been collecting and have loved cards since I was a young kid.
I always ask artists this, right? When we're kids, myself included, like I said, I can't draw myself, to save my life. But when you're young, right, you're in kindergarten, and you're drawing a picture probably with crayons, and to you, right, it's a masterpiece, right? Even though to probably an older person, it just looks like a bunch of different crayon colors on a page. When did you know, like even as a young kid, like, hey, like this is good. Like I got something here. I've got a skill.
Yeah. Well, I think, I knew I was better than, most kids around me, even at a young age. When I tell people kindergarten teachers, first grade, second grade teachers were keeping my artwork from class. So they were obviously noticing, oh, this kid's doing something I really haven't seen much before. And so, it was a God-given talent that I just loved to do and enjoyed and was wanting to do it every day and learn as much as I could and still do today. So I think, you start to see like, wow, holy cow, this is like better than some adults draw, when you're in third, fourth grade, fifth grade. Then obviously eventually I was, working on things that again I loved, which could have been comics, cartoons, toys back then. Obviously, then it got into sports and baseball. So at that young age, I was starting to, do a lot of, as detailed as I could. I think the big turn for me, which I've talked about a lot, is I was lucky enough to have my mom take me to art lessons when I was 8, and I started learning with adults and learning how to paint, and that really helped. And going to art shows when I was younger, and even baseball card shows. I mean, I used to go to a lot of baseball card shows when I was younger, when shows were first really starting to take off. And even then, there weren't a lot of artists there. And I'm talking when I was young. So I could have been like 14, 13, 14, 15 years old. So yeah, it was definitely an early thing that was recognized at a young age by a lot of people.
Did you know that, even though obviously you knew you had the talent, like you said, you were sort of years ahead of your time, and you could tell, like, hey, I have something here. Did you know then, like, hey, I want this is what I want to do as a career, or was it too young to really think that far ahead?
Definitely not as a career. I still can't believe it today that I paint for a living. I think it's a very difficult thing. It's being a professional artist is the same as being a professional musician or actor or anything. I just did things and painted sports too because I loved it. I certainly didn't do it thinking I was going to make money in it. And of course, like for me, it's like you mentioned earlier. I paint family portraits to landscapes to wildlife for major um, organizations and galleries, and obviously the sports stuff. But no, I wasn't really thinking that. I started to realize though by the time I was 14, 15 that I can make money with it, which was pretty crazy. When I met DiMaggio at 14 and had him sign a painting at a card show, and being involved with the National Baseball Hall of Fame at 15 years old, and being in the New Jersey area where a lot of people collected and enjoyed sports and sort of got it. It was even at those ages I was like, wow, okay, like this is actually really great. Still not even thinking I'd make a living at it. Late in high school was starting to do very well, was able to pay my way through college because of it. So there was a sense of, oh, this is possible. But again, I just did it for the love of it.
Yeah, and again, I've seen a lot of what you've done. Just I can't say it enough. Just kudos to you on incredible work, and you know, typically, like, how long? I always ask this of an artist. Like, every piece is different. Some maybe are more intricate than others. I mean, they're all intricate in their own right, but maybe one might be a little more detailed. And I know it's probably a hard question to answer. Like, how many, when we see the finished product, right, and it's beautiful, and then I think sometimes, you know we love it, but we don't realize how much, I'll say, like, the blood, sweat, and tears and time goes into a piece. On average, what is how much time does it take to finish an incredible piece?
Yeah, I mean, it's complicated in the sense of like, it's watercolor, which is my medium, which is a very fast medium, but also probably the most challenging medium. And to anyone who doesn't know, you really can't make many mistakes. You can't go over it like acrylic or oils. A medium I fell in love with. I painted almost like acrylic or oils, very photorealistic. It depends. Like, there are paintings that could take me 3 4 days. There are paintings that could take me 2 weeks. It depends on how large they are, if it's a 22 by 30 or a 30 by 40 versus a small painting versus painting on like a card size versus several paint people in the painting. So it varies. I mean, I try to make it like a 9 to 5 job, with a mix of talking to people as well, painting throughout the day, and I'm painting almost every day of the week. So it takes time. There are paintings you could finish one a week, you could finish two in a month, you could finish six in a month, again, depending on the size. But it probably is a lot more than I think sometimes. And I'm lucky to have kind of mastered it in the sense of I've been painting watercolor for over 30 years now. So
You mentioned watercolor, and it's sort of the higher degree of difficulty, right? Like, you don't get any mulligans or do-overs. So you've got to be precise. You got to have a steady hand. What was it about watercolors that drew you to that rather than another medium, let's say?
yeah, I mean, there's something I loved about it when I was young. I joke around saying maybe it wasn't messy or smelled bad like oils when you're mixing paints and stuff. And I had painted in every medium growing up
Yeah.
and even in college. Just the way it flows, the way I controlled it. I think for what I love to paint, which is a lot of detail, it allowed a lot of, detail and grit, and it just had a different feel to it. I think that's why I always, I keep painting it, because I feel like, it separates me from a lot of artists, in how I paint it. So just something there, and it also lends itself really beautifully, I think, to sports, especially baseball, especially actually painting vintage cards and things like that, because it's just that watercolor has that old school feel to it. So it's worked out really well that way.
Now, I have a feeling I sort of know the answer, but it may not be as simple as I think. Use a technique called a dry brush technique. Is it as simple as it sounds, where you're just not using, where when you're painting, the average person, they're dipping their paintbrush into a cup of water and then into the paint, where it's not as wet? Is it as simple as that, or am I simplifying it too much?
I think it's like anything else. The more you experience something, the more you do it, you figure it out. However, there's always everybody has a different way of doing things, and it's funny because let's say maybe a month ago I did a watercolor demo for a local watercolor society, and I don't do them often just based on time and everything. But I was like, yeah, I'll be happy to do it. And even the people in the room were laughing because I do stuff very differently, and it was unique, and they can't figure out how I'm doing it. And sometimes I say I don't even know how I'm doing it. It just kind of comes out, and you figure it out along the way. And that's the beauty of anybody creating any kind of art. So I do think there are techniques that I do that a lot of people wouldn't be able to do, or they quit while doing it. They think they're making a mistake. To get very technical with it, it's, I use a very heavy paper, you're scraping away paper, you're doing this and that. And again, that's trial and error and figuring out over many, many years what brushes, what paint, what paper. Um, and so anyway, yeah, I think that if a teacher is teaching you, certainly you can kind of figure that stuff on your own, but it takes a lot of time and effort, to be able to learn it.
Yeah, no doubt. Like I said, you're talking to someone who can barely draw a stick figure. You're an accomplished athlete as well. You played baseball, including in college. Do you think being a baseball player and athlete, does that help you as an artist when painting athletes, or is it really, are they mutually exclusive?
It's a good question. I do think it helps. I think that in anything, there's a trueness and an honesty to the way you paint and what you love and a passion. I think maybe certainly I know what may look right or really cool to someone, size wise, cropping wise, certain ways people throw something, swing. So I do think because I have a passion and I really appreciated, I appreciate what these guys are doing today, and have a love for it, and playing it on a very low level in college, but still, I do think that that adds to it. I think that, if I went and painted something I don't know much about, could I do a good job? Sure, but it may not be the passion that maybe somebody who specializes in that would have. I certainly feel like you see that same thing in my work, in my landscapes or portraits of people and wildlife, which I love. So I think it's, it certainly helps, especially for, growing up playing basketball, baseball, and football and being a fan of it, and especially in baseball. Yeah, I'm still as excited today to paint those things and learning even more now about sports and different things through my kids. It's still exciting and helps, I think.
Obviously, you're uber talented. I'm sure nothing gives you too much grief, but is there a sport or a niche of painting that maybe get you a little more white knuckle over another one, like football to baseball, or wildlife to sports, or is it not really? It's all, is it all the same? It's just the subject is different.
Yeah, not really. I think I always say, like, obviously when you're doing a painting of a player or someone famous that you're presenting to, or even if they're not famous, even if it's just, regular people, anytime you're painting them, it's the hardest because again, I say no one knows what the tree looks like, or an animal's face looks like. Trying to paint realistic or paint someone accurately is always the hardest. Um, So that's still a challenge, I think, for me today at times. But I enjoy, again, painting everything. If I had my choice, I'd probably do a lot more landscapes, which are a lot of fun for me. Um, but not really. I think maybe from a sports standpoint, I've painted a lot of vintage cards, which I love doing, which is part of There's Only One collection. So like when I'm painting old Ruths and Joe Jacksons and Wagners, and painting some of those cards at like a larger size, like the Ruth behind me, they're very challenging, I think. Very different way of kind of attacking the artwork and painting it like the card looks like. So that's a little bit different and fun for me. So you're always learning something new and trying to do something different.
Are you like, is there a little extra pressure when maybe you're commissioned by an athlete to do a piece for them? Because obviously you take pride in what you do, whether it's something you're doing on your own or your commission. I'm sure that without even hearing you answer that. But is there a little, is the ante get upped a little bit when you know, like for sure, that this athlete is actually, or a family of that is going to see the piece, and you want it to be, in your mind, like perfect?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, especially if it's a bigger project. I mean, for example, I just finished painting the National Baseball Hall of Fame's yearbook cover again. I was honored to be able to do it last year, which was amazing. And, not only are you painting the cover that thousands of people get and see, but the players and the players' family. And then the original was hanging in the Hall of Fame. So you got a lot of people coming in to see it. So I think the painting, for example, I just did maybe a few weeks ago. You almost lock in a little more. I think it's like anything else. You're concentrating a little more. You're working on it a little more, and because you're trying to obviously put out the best work you can. So and that's still exciting for me. So again, 30 years later, even still working in this subject matter is exciting when I get to do something I feel like on that level for a lot of people to say.
Yeah, definitely. I get that. Do you ever get, like, again, I'm not trying to compare my dad to what you do, but even as a kid, seeing my dad at his easel painting, like I said, I talked to you before we start, does a lot of Disney work. He's 88, still painting. But I remember even as a kid, he'd walk away. I could tell he was like a little flustered, frustrated. Like I got to take a break. Um, Obviously, again, I'm not comparing skill levels to you to him, or him to you. Do you ever get moments like that? Like, hey, I've painted enough today. I gotta get up
Yeah.
and take a break. You hit that sort of wall.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, especially when you're painting detail, I paint, on a desk that's got a little angle to it and you're kind of hunched over. So you got to walk around, stretch, come back to it. The more you come back to look at things is really good. Sometimes, sharing it with my family to take a look at it. But yeah, it's again, an artist. It's a real blessing and a beautiful thing to be able to do for a living and do it every day. But just like anything else or any kind of work, you got to step away, come back, step away. Sometimes you make mistakes, you fix them. You try to pick things that are challenging, but also that you could do a good job on. But yeah, definitely.
Yeah, you've already mentioned most know your work. Like your stuff is in Cooperstown. I mean that in itself is just incredible. You can tell, hey, I'm in the Hall of Fame too. Maybe I didn't hit 700 something home runs, but I'm there. In artist terms, you're worthy. Do you remember like the first time that happened and that feeling? Can you go like just kind of recant the first time, and is it comparable to almost being inducted? Like, hey, people are going to go through the hall, and it's like you said, the cover of the mag, like lots of people are going to, thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, are going to see my work on a daily basis. Like just that
Yeah.
feeling the first time. It's probably old hat now, but when it first happened.
Well, it's almost like a way that they're inducting you. As an artist, there's writers that go in, sports commentators and journalists. So, as an artist, there's a lot of tremendous baseball artists out there who are doing such great things for the game and in the past. So it's another way of promoting it and the passion for people and collectors and the love of the game. I remember, getting a phone call. I think I was about 14, 15, because it was in when I was 15. But, to have my Reggie Jackson painting hang, it was surreal. It was surreal to be there because it was in the induction case. And, just hundreds of people coming in front of me in the time I was there taking pictures of it. And so that was the first time I couldn't believe that that many people would, have my painting in their house, like in their photos. um, and in all honesty, even last year doing the yearbook cover for the first time, I had done like an induction program once, but doing the yearbook cover was such an extreme honor. And I think the biggest thing for me now was a couple things. I think there's a lot of people that know my work for the last 30 years and have known the trading cards I've done, all the things I've done. And there's people meeting me for the first time seeing it. I think the coolest thing last year and will happen this year is that, my son who's 16 came with me, for the induction and the night before, and we had some time to spend in the Hall of Fame at night on Saturday night with the players. And to have that with my son and to see the original hanging in the induction room last year and players are in there, that is the most amazing thing to me. It doesn't get any better than that. And this year, which I'm very excited about, is my 12-year-old will play baseball there in Cooperstown for the week with his team. And so for him to be there with his team, to have his dad's painting be in there, and that's the big thrill for me now, in all honesty. And like I said, that's a different feeling, but just as amazing as it was when I was a kid at 15.
Yeah, to share that with your kids, and here you are at 15, your work is there. I mean, just that's got to be incredible to think and hear. We and it's, you know what I mean. That can't, you can't change that. Like, it's like being inducted. They can't really take you out. And you mentioned your kids. Did For me, my I didn't get my dad's artist gene. How about your kids from you?
They didn't. I mean, they're pretty good artists in that I always say that I think they're better than average. And actually, if they wanted to do more of it, they'd be pretty good. But they don't have the passion like I do, and did when I was young. But I think they have it in other aspects of their life, which is pretty cool. So I think my 12-year-old, who's very good at music and loves to play the guitar, I think it's in that way for him. And I think my older son, it's in writing and his ability to write and write with empathy and detail and just like his thought process. So I think they certainly have that side of their brain going, just not drawing wise, and that's fun to see. So
I'm a vintage guy. I collect modern cards too. I don't want to make, but I'm heavy vintage guy. I've always said on the show, when other artists have been on the show, art is such a fabric and an integral part of trading cards from the early days, and even today it's still it's always been intrinsic and important. And sometimes I get mad, James, when I feel like people don't give art and artists enough credit for some of the things we're seeing today. They just think, I think sometimes with AI, which I know is a great tool, but it makes things sometimes easier and makes us lazier, myself included. I don't think artists and art gets enough credit for trading cards of the past and even the products that we have today. As an artist yourself, I mean, do you agree? What's your take on when you hear that?
yeah, I agree totally. Obviously, and to me, that's what I've had a passion for vintage cards and old time players since I was a kid. I was really interested in that, and I collect. I mean, like those old painted cards from the 50s, even going back later. But I love the 53 set. I talk about the 53 set all the time. My cousin had it. Jerry Dvorak, one of the original artists for that set, was a mentor to me growing up. Um, I just can't get enough of those cards. I'm so happy that, a lot of the modern cards, a lot of these companies have been using artists now over the years. I would argue that there's nothing better than pulling a one of one art card by someone who's very talented and well known artist than an autograph card. You're talking about a one of one original painting, and I do see some of them getting their due on the secondary market from a lot of these guys. I know some of these talented artists who are friends of mine. Um, and so I love the fact that that's happening. I think art's on the rise. I think it's being collected more. I think people are understanding it more, certainly in the sports world as well. It's been that way for me now for the last 4 or 5 years, where things have been huge. I've been blessed and lucky enough to paint for card companies for many years. Not as many recently. Hopefully, I'll be doing some more maybe for next year. But going back to my cards in '99 with tops and the upper deck cards. And even like this year, I was posting the 25th anniversary of my cards for Upper Deck in 2001. People still contact me over those cards and how excited they are by them and just finding them for the first time. And so there's just something so unique and special about art and art being in the packs and knowing the artists and their life and what they've done and accomplished. It goes back to me to, when I was a kid, though, from Dick Perez and Vernon Wells and guys like that. Of course, I was the most excited about those cards I would get in the packs. And then obviously, like you mentioned, going back to vintage times of it's amazing to think about those guys, painting back then for those cards in the 50s. And so yes, I do agree with you. I think it's amazing. I love to see more of it. I think Topps has done a great job with bringing a lot of artwork back into everything over the last 5, 6 years or more. So I'm excited that I got on it pretty early, back in '99. So yeah, I'm hoping to do a lot more, which would be a lot of fun. There's nothing cooler too than having packs of your cards in packs that your kids can open. So hopefully, I'd love to do like my own set, something really special and unique like that. So
You mentioned like there's some accomplished and acclaimed artists along with yourself, especially in the sports niche. Is it more of a fraternity, or can it get competitive too? Does everyone mostly get along, or is there
mm,
some instances where maybe that's not always the case?
I think it's like anything in life, right? I mean, it's competitive. I mean, I've mentored artists for the last 25 years, literally. And guys have been calling me for years, contacting me, and I am as good as I can be to everybody with advice and help. Still doing it today. Um, it is competitive, but I don't understand why an artist wouldn't be very supportive of another artist, because it benefits everybody. The more everyone does well, the better it is for every artist. Um, but it's life, and there are people out there who act a certain way, and again, I stay in my own lane to do what I do, and I've always had respect for a lot of guys. And I'm excited by some talented artists today, like I mentioned. I've been lucky to even collaborate with some of them, personally at events, at shows. Um, and so for me, it's always an honor to be friends with guys that who are talented and speaking with them and talking about artwork and their process. Um, and again, I will tell people, you know, there are a tremendous amount of talented artists out there, not just in sports, obviously in everything. You have to be very, I'm trying to think of the word. Like, I hustle still today. I work hard. I'm going after things. I'm marketing stuff. I'm thinking of stuff. I raise a lot of money
You
for
grind. It's a
organizations.
grind. You're
It is a
grinding.
grind, even as well known as I am. And so there's a lot that goes into it. And so it's a business in the end, even though I do a lot, for the love of it. So that's, one of the main things I always tell people. But again, I think it's wonderful that you're seeing a lot of tremendous artists getting into this. I think a lot of those guys have seen me over the years, and hopefully I've, influence them to be excited about being able to do something like this. It's certainly more competitive now than it was when I first started. But anyway, it is fun to see.
Like you mentioned, you've worked for some incredible athletes, Ted Williams. You mentioned Cal Ripken, others, Whitey Ford. I even believe I could be wrong, but is, talk about are can they be, you have to get into specifics, but can some of the athletes maybe be temperamental, or hey, is it done, or don't, you know what I mean? They sort of maybe rush the process, or they don't realize the time, and or most of them pretty, personable, where that's really not an issue, or is it really just varies by who it might be?
Yeah, I mean, it varies. I mean, it's not like every day I'm being commissioned by the players. A lot of it comes through other things. But I mean, overall, my experience for this many years has been extremely positive. Again, I'm meeting players in a different way versus like the regular public. And I've done a lot of good for a lot of players, again, for them and their charities and things like that. But no, I think overall it's been an incredible experience. I look back, obviously, and feel really blessed that I was around guys like you mentioned, like Ted Williams and Mantle. And I mean, it's been a lot of amazing athletes in all different sports. And so that's where, it's really unique, where there's a lot of artists who come into the field now who are just starting. And where like I have a lot of things I've done which also ties myself into the history of what those players have done for them. But being around those legendary guys like Mays and Aaron and Ted Williams and DiMaggio and Mantle, all when I was a kid, becoming friendly with Whitey and Yogi and Musial. I mean, just that to me will always be the greatest thing. I'll always have that. I've got amazing stories with those players. Talking to them about baseball. Obviously being a kid and playing at that time. I mean, it's just that's the amazing part, I think, for me.
Yeah, and incredible. Like to, just to rub elbows with that kind of athletic talent, and Hall of Famers, obviously in their own right. Have you ever? I always say, have you ever, because of these experiences that are unique? Other people may meet them, but like you said, not in the same vein as you have. Have you ever thought about writing a book about your sort of your career as an artist, even as a young adult, and then interweaving some of these stories with these incredible players?
Yeah, I think, well, I came out with a baseball book about a little over a year ago now, which was just on baseball. Beautiful coffee table book with a lot of my baseball art only, and it has a lot of stories in that. And I did the baseball one because it was the easiest and that I've done the most and I had the most stories from it. So I'm super excited about that, and people can still get that book. Um, but a book on my whole life would be unique because even for me today, I can't believe some of the stuff I've done and experienced. Again, outside of sports, whether it's being around Congressman John Lewis to the President Gorbachev to Desmond Tutu to guys like Ali and Buzz Aldrin and all these big athletes in different situations and meeting them and painting them and actors and it's been really amazing. And even just again, like I mentioned before, doing this for a living and helping people and just all the organizations and my experience even in nature and wildlife and people like that. So it has been exciting. Maybe maybe one day when I'm older, it'll be something that people want to read from. How I was able to sort of do everything. But now I've got the baseball book out, which is kind of cool, and I'm excited about that.
Well, you listen. I'll you said mention your son's a pretty talented writer. Maybe he could be
Yeah,
the writer, and you could just tell him to fill in the details, and he could author the book. Together with Dad there. So
it's a good point.
something to chew on.
Yep.
So you mentioned working for Tops and Upper Deck, and again, even that, it's just tremendous to get to do that as a kid that collected cards and someone that still does. How much did they give you a lot of leeway, like poetic license to, like, hey, this is what we need, but you do, or were they more hands on than maybe you would have preferred? How was that
Yeah,
process?
there's a little bit of both. I think the 99 tops cards, I was in college. I was a junior in college, I believe, sophomore, junior. I worked on them with Bill Purdom, who was a talented, amazing artist, and I did 10 out of the 20 cards of that 99 Topps Gallery Heritage insert set. Obviously, the coolest thing was that they were modeled after the 53 cards, so they were current players in the 53 setting. I mean, I still love like the Griffey and the Gwynn and the Jeter. I did a Hank Aaron, which was the only older player in that set. But that was an amazing set to do. And that was they give you images to work from, so you're basically working from whatever they tell you, and then you work on some of the old 53 backgrounds. I think that was probably one of the most exciting things in my life, to like open up cards for the first time and pulling my artwork out of a pack, going back to again being a collector. There was nothing. I mean, I was obsessed as a kid with baseball cards. I mean, that's all I got for holidays and birthdays, and was every single card and putting together and going through. That's how we knew every player, remembered everyone. So to obviously have those cards at that time was amazing. And then Upper Deck, again, now being 25 years, that was also tremendous because the first, I mean, I had done baseball, football, basketball, and hockey and golf. And the golf cards were Tiger Woods' rookie year. So I painted Tiger Woods' rookie. The baseball cards when they first came out, which all those, other than the golf ones, they were all done in black and white, but they had my name on them. So I could not believe Upper Deck did that, which was awesome. Like for them to say, we were just talking about how big artists feel. Upper Deck was ahead of their time in the sense of putting my name, the Fiorentino collection, on those first baseball cards. So they were like saying, hey, we believe in this artist. This artist is a big deal, makes the cards better. And the basketball ones now are just tremendous because, like the Jordan card I did, and there were game used versions of the cards with my artwork on them, which I think people are all starting to figure that out now. It's like there's Jordan game used cards. There's my Jordan autograph version went for over 50,000 in Heritage a few months ago. The Tiger Woods cards that are signed go for 10, 20 grand, I think. So that was really exciting. That was 70 something paintings, and I was still living at home with my parents. So I remember painting them all in the basement. Um, I think 2001. So 2003, I did more for Upper Deck. My cards were on the boxes, on the packs. Also very exciting. That was a first. Did some cards for Kellogg's products, which were fun. The latest cards I had done was Topps Transcendent, and that was the first time I'd ever painted directly on the card. So the previous paintings were all like 11 by 14s, and I would shrink them down. But this was the first time I was painting directly on a card surface. That was an amazing set. There was only 50 of my cards, all baseball Hall of Famers that were found in the 50 transcendent sets. Some of those would surface on eBay from time to time. I got a few back, which was cool. So again, that was also exciting. So a lot of different like versions and ways that I've painted cards over the years. Certainly would love to do it again if it was like the right project. And again, for me, it's like it's hard to go backwards because being young, I was doing amazing cards. So for me, it would be like I'd have to have like my own set or my name on the cards, or something really unique and special, and hope that, one of the card companies would be excited to work with me on something like that. I've been lucky enough to have a lot of people collect my artwork, and I feel like people will go really crazy for those cards of mine, and hopefully that'll be a future project to look forward to.
Yeah, and I remember the Upper Deck, and I remember the Tops too. But like you said, kudos to them for even putting your name on it, right, and recognizing the talent specifically, and sort of giving credit where credit was due. And those was obviously, like you mentioned, stand the test of time. Does it surprise you, just in general, not just even art cards, but some of what these cards are going for in auction? Like I'm probably a little bit older than you, but we're in the same sort of era. If you would have told the younger versions of ourselves what some of these cards would be, millions, and like you said, even the signed art cards that are 5 or 6 figures, like it's just crazy where the hobby has went. Does it surprise you, or not so much?
Yeah, I think it surprised me a little. Not anymore. I think that people kind of figured it out and it caught up to like where it probably should be. Maybe it's a little high, but at the same time, it's like cards are like pieces of art, especially the vintage cards and even some of the modern stuff. And, to see these very rare cards signed by players, and it's just another alternative asset that people want to collect, whether it's high end comics or coins or anything else. And it is exciting and it is some beautiful stuff. So, and I think a lot of people who made a lot of money, been very successful, have put their money into it. That's been able to allow this to happen. But sports are amazing and are wonderful and are memorable. And so now you're capturing that through cards, you're capturing that through art, and you're passing that on, hopefully, to your family and friends and people like that. So it is exciting to see that. And like we were mentioning before, I love seeing the art side of it come through in that way. But yeah, it is amazing to see the amount of wealth in all of this, and it's very cool to see my cards. I wish I had a bunch of the Jordan cards signed. I'd be very happy right now. Um, but it is even amazing for me to see one of those cards go for that much.
You know, I'm sure you know the Tops 2020 project, obviously, in 2020. That like I said, art's always been a part of it, but that said, again, sort of brought it to the forefront. People have been critical of it, some of the work in that. People have acclaimed. Obviously, the project itself did very, very well. What were your thoughts? Did you think that helped? Do you think was there good and bad with something like that? Or is it like a double edged sword, or is it all good?
Yeah. Well, I think it's great. I mean, again, to me, I tell people when you collect my art, you collect it for the passion of it and the love of it. Like I don't want people to necessarily invest in my art, even though my work has gone up over the years, and I feel like it continue and will continue. And we never know what one of my paintings will sell down the road. Those cards came out at the right time, right? This is after COVID. People are home, they're buying stuff, and it was fantastic to see all these different artists do this set. I know some of the artists that worked on those sets. I even collected some of them. And again, I think if you're buying them because you generally appreciate them and view them and showcase them and have a passion for it, that's what you should be buying it for. Whether they made 100 of them or 100,000 of them, it's all about what you're getting out of it. It's a big difference if you're spending a tremendous amount of money for a card, but in that case, you're paying a decent amount, like a small amount that you can afford. Pick the things you like. And again, it's just fantastic that the artists had done well from that set, that people really enjoyed it. A lot of those artists were meeting people at shows. It just, I mean, to me, like for me, going to like the Philly show or the National, for example, and meeting fans and clients and new people to my work. That's what it's all about. Like you go to a show now and it's so interesting. It's not just cards. It's all different people there doing different things, and then when you can meet an artist who works on those sets, I mean that's incredibly satisfying. There's a lot of younger kids, like we were talking about earlier, who are into sports art and into drawing, and they get excited to meet me and other artists. So I think it's great. I love it. I do like what Tops has done with art. Like anything else, sometimes maybe things get to be a little too much, but overall, I think it's wonderful that they're promoting it, and they've done a really good job with it.
James, you mentioned sort of, want to get back on the horse and maybe work with a card manufacturer again, getting your work on some cards. What about, and I don't know the legalities, maybe in the same way you would. We've seen like Dick Perez, who I know you mentioned earlier. He's done stuff like on his own, like
Hmm.
producing some sets on his own. Is that something that maybe you would do or want to do, or has that, I don't want to steal the secret sauce, but is that
Hmm.
something like if a card company doesn't come calling per se, like you can still do like your original artwork? I don't know all the legalities,
Yeah.
but is that something we may see?
Yeah. I mean, I don't. I really now I only paint originals, so I'm able to paint any kind of
Yeah.
original or small painting that would be like a card size or something like that. But no, I wouldn't like produce my own cards or anything. I really only work on originals for clients. But I've already been approached by card companies in the past. I think like it'll come in the future as well. It's just a matter of kind of putting it all together to make it work. But you know, even doing stuff with the Baseball Hall of Fame right now, there may be even projects like that down the road to do. But yeah, I'm hoping to work with one of those card companies again and do some fun stuff. I always feel like what's meant to be is meant to be, and luckily I'm always busy with doing a lot of work. But yeah, I would only do like cards really honestly if I was working directly with one of those companies like that. But for me, you know, it's more than just having my original art now in the packs, which I've only again done once. I would want my cards reproduced as like a specialty set or again my own set if I was able to work on a lot of them. I think it's awesome when collectors can get like box topper paintings and things like that. I mean, that is the coolest. I mean, I would have went nuts for that stuff when I was younger. So again, it's another part of the hobby that people can appreciate and start collecting and understand and get into the different artists. Um, so yeah, I mean, there's a lot of years of me working on this stuff that hopefully something will come up really good. There's a lot of companies out there doing a lot of stuff now with artists. So hopefully that again will happen in the near future.
Yeah, and I hope so too. I love to see that, and again, your work's incredible. Even aside from that, if like like you said, you're still producing some incredible work. I know you pour your heart and soul to whatever piece you're doing, whether it's an athlete, like you said, wildlife or still life or whatever the case may be. Is there though? Is there an athlete? You know, with this being a sport, is there an athlete that you sort of have a you like painting more than maybe another like as fans, right? We all have our favorite baseball player or team, and I
Mhm.
know you're a Yankee. Is there a player for you that you really maybe the juices get a little more even flowing, you get a little more amped up when you're painting that particular subject?
Great question. I'll probably lead into a cool project where I think when I'm painting the vintage guys, I think when I'm painting Cobbs and Mantles and Wagners and Ruths, those guys still today, when I was a kid, I get really excited. I mean, there's nothing cooler than painting a Babe Ruth to me. And so now, like, I'm working on some originals with the National Baseball Hall of Fame to sell directly in their store, and it's sort of like a fundraiser. But yeah, obviously the Hall of Fame makes some money, which is always exciting for me to be able to do that. And be able to paint those vintage guys to me is probably still the most exciting thing.
Yeah, I love it, and there was something that baseball is obviously a great sport with a long history. It's the one sport I always tell people, right? We know like the numbers, we know the records, we know of all the sports, we know like 56 game hitting streak and 61 with Maris and Babe Ruth and 714, and then Aaron at 715, and then Bonds later on with an asterisk, if you will, breaking those records as well. But there's something pure about that, and I think even I always say, whatever you like, right? You have to give credit to the past. That's how we got here, and again that those vintage era players. We've got great players today, and Judge and Bobby Witt Jr. and Paul Skeens, and the list goes on and on. But they wouldn't be here, and the sport wouldn't be here with all those guys that came before. So always appreciate when people sort of appreciate that. And so hearing you say that, I get it, and it makes sense, and appreciate it. Well, speaking of appreciation, I know you're a busy guy. Appreciate you making some time for us here on the podcast, and for those listening. I always give the guest kind of the final word. Anything you want to plug, website, social media, where to go to see what you're doing, or even get a part of it. Take your time, and wherever you want to steer folks, go ahead and put that information out there.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, you can go to jamesfiorentino.com and just Google my name and I'll pop up a million times. And then if you find me on all like the social media accounts, Instagram and Facebook, and just look me up. I'm constantly posting new events, new projects, new things to come meet me at, see me at. Um, from New Jersey to all parts of the country, depending on what I'm doing. I love meeting collectors, fans of my work, artists, everything. So, just contact me that way. I try to get back to everyone as well. That's always just wonderful for me to be able to do that. And yeah, I appreciate it. Again, I love sharing my story, and I love people hearing it for the first time. And if people have heard me, they're hearing stuff that they've never heard before. Because there has been a lot that I've done over the years. So again, I appreciate it, and hopefully, I'll be able to meet some people in the near future.
Yeah, no doubt. Again, thanks, James, for sharing some of those incredible stories.
Thank you.